Chapter 3 has been a rough one for me. This will be my third video on it, and I just haven't liked any of the videos that I made, so this is like right before publishing. Like, I do not have time to edit. I need to get a video done. It's not because I've been procrastinating. I have made multiple videos about this chapter, and I just don't feel like any of them really encapsulated what I wanted to say. And so this one's going to be a little bit different. I know this is like titled A Woman's Reaction To, but we all know it's just a book review. I call it A Woman's Reaction To because generally women don't read these kinds of books, and generally women, let's face it, most women who read these kinds of books or encounter these kinds of books have all this feminine mindsets, preconceived ideas about it, and so when they look at it, they get really huffy about it, and they don't really have anything productive to say about it anyway. So when I say a woman's reaction, it's mostly just because I'm a woman who's not reading this with some sort of feminist lens, which is probably not the most common thing that occurs. This chapter right here, totally going to be all about my reaction to the chapter. I don't know how much I can actually say about the chapter itself that I think would be particularly productive. I'm going to talk about how this chapter kind of just walloped me in the face. I think that's why the first two videos I made about it were so bad. My experience with nice guys, the only experience that I've ever had in my life with nice guys, has been the occasions when I've encountered a nice guy and he's done something nice guy-ish, and it's put me off and I've gone away and avoided him. I've never had an intimate look into the mind and the thought processes of a nice guy. And so this has been a very eye-opening read for me. So it's a good chapter. It's a well-written book. I'm definitely not saying anything bad about the book. It's just there's so much very new and very foreign information for me to process that the first couple of videos I made, it was like, I just don't know what to say, which doesn't make for a very good book review. So this chapter was about the need that nice guys have to, as part of their overall healing and recovery process, to take the time to do things for themselves, things that are good and beneficial to them specifically. And that is so far from my own mindset. I do things for myself whenever I can squeeze them in. Now, granted, I have responsibilities. I have a family. I have small children who need constant care and attention. I have dishes to clean. I have food to cook. I have a living room that is constantly being repopulated by random toys that need to be picked up. I have things that I need to do. And any time that I can squeeze even just a few minutes or even seconds away from these duties, you can pretty well count on me spending it on something that is solely for my own entertainment and enjoyment, such as reading men's self-help books and then reviewing them on the internet. So the idea that a person might not be inclined to do things for themselves because, and maybe this is just my interpretation of it, it seems like they're doing this because it causes far too much anxiety. It's not because they have some sort of strong altruistic streak that runs through them or some sense of nobility that's driving them. It's because they're absolutely terrified that if they start doing something selfish, something in the realm of self-care, not necessarily selfish. We have this very negative association with the word selfish, but something for themselves, for their own benefit or their own betterment. Suddenly it's too much selfishness, and it's scary to them. And so what he's talking about is anxiety. And that's something that I never even began to guess at when it comes to the nice guy mentality. Like, I was trying to comb my mind for any experiences that I've had with nice guys that were clearly nice guy moments. There was the guy I broke up with that I talked about in the one chapter, and he was sort of a nice guy in the sense that he said he was a nice guy, perhaps he might even have thought he was a nice guy on occasion, but he was really, really definitely not a nice person. And so I always kind of wondered to what extent he genuinely believed that he was a nice guy and to what extent he just... I've wondered how much he fits the profile. And the more I read, the more I realize that, well, maybe he did actually fit the profile. But he was an odd one, like, overall. But then I thought, like, just recently, like this last week or so, some guy attempted to take me to task for the story I told about the guy who bought me like $500 worth of dinners and then expected that I would give him sex in exchange for that. And that was a perfect example of a covert contract. And I had completely forgotten about this dude. And so somebody's, yelling at me through the internet, telling me that I'm a liar, and I knowingly took advantage of this dude. And of course I was having a mood swing because I was pregnant at the time, and I was like, going on some angry, very emotional, girly little rant at him about how, I guess and I mean, he's not the only guy who's called me a liar and told me that I knowingly took advantage of this dude. I guess he just expected me not to have friends, because that seems to be the path this generally takes. Like, hey, I thought the guy was a friend. Well, why were you hanging out with him? You shouldn't hang out with guys like that. If you want to have friends, why don't you just go hang out with girls? It's like, well, obviously I can't hang out with women. I'm really, like, back when I was single, no, women, not good. And so I was going off on this little rant. I thought about it a little bit, and I realized it was a perfect example of a covert contract. It was just a classic covert contract example. Here's a guy who basically built this little contractual arrangement in his own head where if he spent X number of dollars seeing me and hanging out with me, that meant that I would owe him sex. And he never talked to me about this. It was a covert contract. And I honestly didn't think we were dating. I thought we were just hanging out and, eating junk food at Denny's and chatting. And for the record, no, he did not buy me $500 worth of food at Denny's, because that would be kind of exorbitant. He was counting the food he bought me, the food he bought himself, the money he tipped the waitress, and probably the amount of gas money that he spent trying to get to the Denny's where he met me. Like, I'm pretty sure he didn't spend a full $500 just on yours truly. And I mean, he wouldn't let me pay, so whatever. But it's amazing to me how many men have looked at that and said that I was in the wrong. And that always kind of is interesting to me. It could either be, I assume it's one of two things. Either it's red pill guys who have been wronged by women and have, gotten into the red pill rage kind of phase of it, where it's like all women are just out to use men 100% of the time. Hashtag AWOLT. That's all they're there for. That's all they want. And the idea that a woman might innocently attempt to hang out with a man simply because she enjoys his company and companionship, it just doesn't quite register with these guys. And the other thing that I wonder is how many of them are men who have the nice guy mentality and see the world through the nice guy mindset. And so the really trippy thing about this chapter has been, like, my dawning realization, starting in chapter 1 and all the way into chapter 3, that these people, it's not just about how they relate to women and interact with women, it's how they relate to the world. And I'm just trying to soak that in. I'm not a particularly empathetic person. Like, I understand that women are supposed to be better at the whole empathy thing, and, it's one of those things, like, so many people complain that women will never argue against anything, any statistic that you say that makes women look good. Like, women are better linguistically than men. They tend to be stronger linguistically than men. And no woman is ever like, oh, hashtag NAWALT for that one. But when it comes to being more empathetic than men and having a better grasp of empathy and the finer nuances of human interaction and sociality, I'm just I suck. I'm bad at it, guys. I really am. So empathizing with a different frame of mind, not something I'm good at. Understanding where these guys are coming from, really not something I'm good at. I live in a completely separate universe than these guys. I'm distrustful of other people, probably to a fault. Definitely to a fault. And the idea of believing that the world could ever be so kind or so predictable as to honor any of these covert contracts is just it's no, it just doesn't work that way. Nothing works that way. How do you think that anything works that way? It's just it's awe-inspiring to me. But these guys actually really desperately try to cling to this idea, and it's I'm tempted to say it's the worship of a false god. You're putting all this effort into it, praying desperately that you'll get what you want, and it's definitely not going to give you anything back. They're hoping that if they just keep being nice, if they keep building up this social credit with the people around them and being, really nice and making everyone else happy and making the world a very soft, padded, pleasant little place where nothing goes out of order, then they can be safe. It's really, really anxiety-driven thinking. And it's extremely foreign to me because the world I know is covered in thorns. And it's a rare thing that I see anything that isn't particularly prickly or harsh. And usually when I do, I'm struggling to believe my eyes. For example, at one point, this is one thing that I do have in common with nice guys. They don't like getting gifts because they don't know what to do with gifts. And I don't know what to do with gifts either. When I was pregnant with my first child, there were these missionaries who would come into the strip club and try to, get us all to go over to Jesus. And they were pleasant enough people. They were very nice, they were extremely well-meaning, and they weren't pushy, which is what I liked about them. And so I would go over and I would chat with them every time they came over, just to be polite, just to talk. And when they found out I was pregnant and I wasn't coming into work because I was pregnant, they sent a care package to the strip club. And so I got called down to the strip club, and I came in, and they had given me a blanket that my daughter is actually sleeping with right now. And I think it was like just a bunch of things, like a gift card for a massage, the blanket, a pair of pajamas, like just a bunch of really nice, sweet, thoughtful stuff. And I remember just staring at it for the longest time. And the manager at the club asked me if everything was okay, and I was like, oh yeah, sure, it's fine. And I was just staring at it like, why the fuck are these people giving me a gift? Who the fuck is that nice? What the fuck? I mean, I really appreciated it. I genuinely did. I came and thanked them, afterwards, and I was very grateful. But dude, why the fuck are you being so nice to me? I mean, I'm not the naive girl that I was back when I let that guy buy me like however many dollars worth of meals. It definitely was not a full 500. You get jaded with life sometimes. And I mean, if you're me, you get really jaded with life, especially if you work in a strip club for 8 years and everything has strings attached. But of course, it's a strip club. It's not the real world. When you exit the strip club, you have to leave the strip club mindset behind, or you will start having trouble interacting with people. And that was something that I luckily managed to do, and something that many women do not manage to do. And it's one of the bad things about strip clubs that I need to make a separate video about someday. The idea that these guys have about the world, the thought process that goes into these guys' understanding of the world, just it's really fascinating, it's really interesting, it's really eye-opening, because when a girl like me interacts with a nice guy, we see this very negative, manipulative, at least I did, negative, manipulative, kind of weaselly and weak sort of person. Like, we see this very unpleasant image of a person. And so that's the picture that I have in my mind, of this very unpleasant person who's going to attempt to get stuff out of me, not because he has any genuine care or liking for me, but because he just wants to use me for as much as he can get. and I'm used to people trying to use me, and so I'm very put off by it very quickly. It never began to occur to me that he might be driven by his own anxieties to try to put forward this false persona, which very rapidly scratches away the moment, the actual realities start to come out. And that's something that I don't know how many nice guys see. And I was thinking about this book. It's like a lot of people recommended that I review this book. So I'm assuming that many of you have already read this book. And so I'm trying to kind of figure out how many of the people who are watching this review have already read this book and just want to see what I have to say on it, and how many people who are watching this video are considering reading this book and don't really know what to make of it yet. And so if you're one of those guys who is considering reading this book, who suspects that he is a nice guy, who thinks that he is a nice guy, that's not what people see. You greet us with the nice facade, and the nice facade is only a facade, so it scratches away very quickly. It falls apart, it begins to crumble. And the things that come out underneath it are nasty and unpleasant. Things like, hey, I just bought you $500 worth of meals, or about $500 worth of meals. We're going to say it's $500 because I want what I want. And so now you owe me sex. Which any self-respecting girl that you ever meet in your entire life, even if she is a stripper, she's not going to sell you sex for half or less of $500 worth of hamburgers. It's insulting. And that's what people see. That's the reason the nice guy is made fun of in the internet. That's the reason the nice guy is kind of something that you don't want to be. Because, yeah, for the first few minutes, hours, days, weeks that you know this guy, he's nice. And everything's nice and it's pleasant. You're like, hey, this is going really well. And then you start to actually get to know him. And this is another reason that I really think you shouldn't be having sex with people right away, because you really do need to get to know them before you can actually say you know them. And knowing them in the physical sense doesn't actually, or in the biblical sense, doesn't actually help you get to know them any better, really. It doesn't do any good. So I'm really glad that I didn't hop into bed with this one, because oh my God, what a mess. But yeah, if people take the time to get to know you, and as they're getting to know you, they start noticing that you are only giving so that you can get something in return, they're going to think that you're not a nice person. So you can say you're a nice guy. You can tell yourself you're a nice guy. You're not being a nice guy. And, Glover talks about this. He talks about how so many of the strategies that nice guys employ to make themselves seem nice, to make themselves lovable and acceptable, because of their constant driving anxiety that maybe they're not lovable, maybe they shouldn't get love and acceptance and respect. Maybe they won't be able to have these things if they don't constantly work and put forth effort to attain that or earn it. All these strategies only serve to drive people away. And so the picture that I see when I read this chapter is very much not the picture that I had formed in my head when I interacted with this guy and maybe even other guys. It's not who I see, because when you're looking from the outside in, you're seeing a very different image than someone who's looking from the inside out. The good news, the thing that I think is very positive about all this, is if you are a guy who's got this kind of nice guy thing going on in your life and you're trying to fix yourself, if you do fix yourself, if you go through the process that this book is describing, and you manage to kind of let go of some of these nice guy anxieties, and they're anxieties, it's fear that's holding you back, and you really need to, easier said than done, but you need to fight that fear. And maybe fighting that fear means going out and doing something nice for yourself. Like, not nice for other people, not something that's going to get you something later on down the road, something that you're just doing for you because you deserve it. It's terrifying. I'm sure it's absolutely terrifying. But doing that, just taking that first absolutely terrifying step, maybe that's going to get you just a little bit closer to the point at which you can actually experience love. Because love is something that people give freely. It just kind of comes forth on its own. It doesn't require anything, and it doesn't ask for anything in return. And so I think it's really quite sad, but I think a lot of these guys don't necessarily understand that love is very free flowing. You don't get anything for loving someone, but you don't have to do anything to earn it either. It just happens. It flows out of a person. It's when it's healthy, it's very free. And so, understanding these ideas, these concepts, these in some cases very strange to me, very foreign to me, positive affirmations and things, all this stuff that kind of goes over my head in some ways, where I look at it and go, there's a reason I didn't go into psychology. All this stuff, if you're doing this, and up until this point you were afraid that if you weren't constantly earning, these grace points with people, then they wouldn't love you. You can let go of that system eventually and actually experience real, healthy love, which is a very positive thing to look forward to. It's scary dealing with anxiety, and that's the thing that just completely blows my mind with this book. I'm always looking at these books from a standpoint of how do men and women interact, and this book in particular is not about how men and women interact. It deals with that, but it deals with how certain men interact with the world as a whole, and how these interactions are unhealthy on pretty much every level of their lives. And that's a lot to process. That's a lot to take in, and it's very foreign to me. Number one, I'm not a dude. This is totally a book for men. And number two, the only times I've ever encountered any of this thinking, any of this mindset, it's been from other people in a much more adversarial kind of way. So it's been interesting. Definitely been interesting. So anyway, that's chapter 3. Chapter 4, it goes a little bit more into how men and women interact, and so hopefully I'll have something a little bit more, a little bit less rambly to say about that chapter. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys later.